2006 Toyota Matrix with this 1ZZ-FE engine, valve cover gasket replacement. Check the pin comment for the timestamps, part numbers, torque values, and links. Diagnostics is next. The valve cover removal starts at about the 2:45 mark. The valve cover replacement starts at about the 20-minute mark. There's a few reasons you may be in here to replace your valve cover gasket, but probably the top two are that you're getting an oil leak at the back. The head kind of sits like this, and if the gasket gets old and dried out, sometimes you'll get an oil leak on the back. Sometimes it'll land back here on this exhaust manifold, and because that exhaust manifold is so hot, you'll get like a smoky kind of effect. You may even smell it in the cabin. Another reason you might be changing your valve cover gasket is because you have some misfire codes, and maybe you pulled one of your ignitors and you had oil on your spark plug or oil on your igniter, and that's caused by a failure of the part of the valve cover gasket that seals the spark plug tubes. The reason that I removed the valve cover gasket was not for any of those reasons, but because I was back here replacing the O-ring on this part right here, which is the timing chain tensioner. And just as a heads up, if you're getting a leak, an oil leak in this part of the engine, and you think it's from the valve cover, because the valve cover is going to be right up here, make sure that it is not in fact this timing chain tensioner. It's a very common leak point, and it sometimes is mistaken for a valve cover leak because of its proximity to the valve cover. Even though it's a bit lower, if it's leaking for enough time and dirt and stuff is moving around, the leak kind of gets a little drawn out. It can be hard to pinpoint exactly where it is. So before you assume that the valve cover is the cause of the leak there, double check and make sure it's not the O-ring on the timing chain tensioner. If you do determine that it's the O-ring on the timing chain tensioner, check the pin comment for a link. That video shows everything in this video as far as removal of the valve cover and reinstall, plus the full FSM factory service manual procedure for replacing that timing chain tensioner. So next we'll get started on the valve cover removal to get in there and replace that gasket. This is luckily a very easy valve cover job. We just have some fasteners for the igniters. We got a couple fasteners for the electrical. We have 2 hoses, and we have some bolts on the perimeter and a couple bolts in the center for the valve cover itself. I'm going to show you every one of these steps, every single bolt for removal and replacement. So let's go ahead and get started. I like to make a little template when I remove components like this, so I can just put each fastener where it belongs. As you can see, we just have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10, 11 fasteners for the valve cover. We have 4 for the coil bolts or the igniters, and then for the electrical bracket we have 1 bolt and 1 nut. And I'm going to show all of these, but just to give you an idea here, I'll just come up right over the top, and actually I'm going to go above my light here. There we go. I might be able to put some arrows on it. We're basically just going to be turning a 10mm socket. I think we might have 1 12. That might be a 12 there. It's pretty straightforward. As far as the valve cover gasket, the valve cover gasket is actually a reusable part, assuming that you got a good one. I usually replace them, but this one's fairly new. It's just been probably 4 years or so, whenever I did the rebuild on this. So I'm going to see if I can get away with reusing it. If you decide at this time to replace yours anyway, let's say it's the original and got 200,000 miles or whatever, I'll put up some part numbers for that. First thing we'll do is disconnect the electrical for each of the igniters. These are the igniters here. This is all fairly well constrained, and the igniters are interchangeable. You can label these if you would like to, 1, 2, 3, and 4. But like I said, these really only fit, the harnesses are only so long the wires are only so long to fit from this harness. But for good practice, I'll show you marking 1, 2, 3, and 4. We don't have to mark the coils, but we can. Next, I'll disconnect the electrical for each one of the igniters. And what I suggest is to actually kind of push it this way a little bit at first. And then you're going to push down here on that part so that it levers up. And sometimes you can just wiggle it off. Sometimes You gotta get it under here and just barely give it just a little bit to clear that, and then wiggle it back, okay? See what I mean about the harness being so short? Oops. Okay, now you can see we have a fastener here, and you might not be able to see it, but I'll show you on the camera. Talking about that one there and that nut there. Put that down here at this nut. I'll just crack this free. Don't be too tight. Same deal here. I'm going to use the magnet as I remove these because I've had butterfingers lately and it's never any fun to drop a fastener. Next we have these 10mm, 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's an example of those. They're all the same. We'll pull all those out. Got those for my little template just to keep track, and now we'll go ahead and just pop each one of these igniters out. Just like that. No oil. If you have oil on it, definitely replace your valve cover gasket, because as you'll see when we get in there, that there's a feature on the valve cover gasket that prevents oil from getting in the spark plug tubes. We'll grab this one here. That one looks good. Grab this one here. And this one here. Let's see if that's oil or if that's old. That looks like that. Oops. Looks like that's actually just old. We'll put the coils to the side. The spark plugs are down each one of these holes. We don't need to remove them, and don't remove them because you want them to protect the hole to the cylinder. If you remove the spark plug, then you might drop something in the cylinder. This will just come up, as you can see, off this stud, but we'll have a little bit more room to work when we remove this hose here. We've got a connection there, and we'll also remove this hose, since it looks like you can probably see that hose a little better. I'll do that one first. This one you can pinch with your fingers, and this is probably going to need a little encouragement. Not too bad. I'm going to make sure that I get this back far enough. There we go. Ooh, yeah, that still needs a little bit of encouragement. Now it's coming. Okay. Bracket's still a little bit in the way, but you can see there's one of these deals just by hand. And you can just reach around the camera here, pull that back, and give that a little encouragement as well. There it goes. Okay. Now we just have to fill in our template here. We have one nut, two nuts, a specialized stud sort of bolt feature. That's the only one that's 12mm. The rest of them are all 10. And then the remainder are 8 regular bolts. I'll show you the locations of all those. It's pretty apparent. Here's one, that's a nut. 2, that's a bolt. 3, that's the stud, that's the one that's a 12mm. 4, that's a nut. 5, bolt. 6, bolt. 7, bolt. 8, bolt. 9, bolt, and then 10, bolt with a specialized little gasket thing under it, and 11 bolt. So those are the 11 fasteners that we need to remove. For these 3 on the corners with the brackets on them, I like to just disconnect the brackets from those plastic things before. I think it's kind of easier, but I'll show you if I can get the camera in here. It's a little tricky. This is kind of hard to show, but that's the best I can do with the camera. Under here, you'll be able to feel like a little tab. Wait, my hand in here. Let's see, that'd probably be, say I'm pressing my finger down like that. Then pull this back. Takes a little bit of effort, but it will come off the bracket. All right. So what you're doing is grabbing this tab and pushing that down, and now that'll give easier access to this. This one here, similar deal. They just have it on the top instead of on the bottom. So you get your finger under there or a pick or whatever, and then pull it back like that. Before we do the other brackets, we'll just lift this up like that. So this gives us a little bit of flexibility because we'll move down there. For this bracket here, the one on that one, see that blue thing? That blue thing has got a little tab on it. Same deal. We're going to press that down and then pull the wiring harness back. And it'll slip off of there. There we go. Okay. And now we just remove these 10 millimeters. I like to start for removing fasteners on valve cover gaskets. I like to start on the perimeter, on the edge, and move towards the middle. So we'll go something like this, dot, 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 towards the middle. And then when we reinstall, we'll start at the middle and then spiral out. That's just the way I like to do it with gaskets. I'm just going to crack each one free. And then I'll go back here. Now I'm going to go over to the other side. Back here. Actually, I'll do this one here. Right there. This one here. The back. That'll come over here. These should not be particularly tight. Now we'll go back right to this one. Where is it? I guess I'll go to this one here. Then that's going to be my 12. This one's the 12 millimeter. And the one back here. Now in the middle, we will grab these. Those are looser. I think those are like 80 inch-pounds. The torque spec on those. Okay. And now we can remove all of them and put them in our template. If you decided to disconnect the braces from the electrical like I did, you can take the whole, or the brackets I should say, you can take the whole bracket out with the fastener and just stick it right in your template. That way you don't get the brackets mixed up. So you can just go right like that. You can put it in the, they have these tabs, so you can put it in the right position too. This is a nut. The nuts, I have them marked here, but I'm just going to put those to the side with the bracket. If when you're pulling this up, I might have to move it. Oh, it came up. This here, this is a part that will come with your new gasket kit. If you did get a new gasket kit, just make sure that you account for that specialized washer there. That's only on those two here in the center. You can see we just got a few left. And this nut, and then that one back there. But this one over here, I just took the nut off of this. I'm gonna have to take a closer look real quick at this bracket to make sure I'm gonna be able to get that out of there. Okay, let's see. There we go. Okay, I'm gonna slip that all the way off because this is the fuel line here, and so if it's kind of getting caught, if you go to pull up on the valve cover, it's just going to catch. So I'm going to pull that off, set that to the side with the nut. And this will be the last one here. Okay. There's our template. We have all of the fasteners filled in. The nuts, I didn't put them in here, but I put them to the side with their brackets. Before you pull the valve cover up, it's always a good idea to make sure things are cleaned up, that nothing's going to be falling back in. On the head, the top of the head right here, where the timing case cover meets the cylinder head here below the valve cover, you'll see like some kind of rubbery stuff. That's form in place or gasket maker. Don't let that fall inside if it happens to move when you lift the valve cover up. It usually doesn't. You usually have to kind of pry it off. But we will be putting new gasket maker there and in the same spot on the back. So I'll just take a moment to just double check, clean up in here, and then we'll pop this valve cover off. I want to edit in a little tip here that you won't see until later in the video, but do this before you try to remove the valve cover because it'll make it easy on you. Just zip tie this harness up out of your way. You can use this AC line here because this is going to get in your way. You'll see that in a second when I take the valve cover off. And then this here, just pop this open like that. All right, take it all the way off, and that will allow you to move this pretty much completely out of your way. It'll make it easier to take the valve cover off. All right, I'm ready to pop this off. I'm going to pick a pry point that does not include a gasket sealing surface or mating surface. And the gasket goes in here like this. It does not come out around that fastener. And this also, this one and that other stud, that's going to constrain you. It's going to make you want to obviously have to go right up. So I'm going to use this as my pry point. I also see one over on the other side that would work too, but let's see how this works here. Just get under here. Shouldn't have to exert too much force. There it goes. All right. If you find that you have to really pry and pry, stop and double check that you haven't forgotten a fastener, particularly this one or that one, since they're a little a little easier to overlook since they're not on the perimeter. So now all this stuff that wants to get in our way, we'll kind of move it to the best that we can and pull this valve cover up. Keep an eye that stuff doesn't fall in. Okay, up on that side. Looks like this valve cover is going to come, the gasket's going to come up with the cover, which would be nice. It makes it easier to reuse that way. All right, so here we go, coming up. And get out of my way. There we go. Okay, now I'm just barely caught over here, and there we go. And there's our valve train. This one looks pretty clean for 220,000 miles, and that's because I rebuilt this. I got this car for $700 a few years ago with a blown head gasket, and it wasn't known what exactly the circumstances were, so I got lucky. I was able to rebuild it. I did have to get this head milled, but this is a better idea of what that's the color there on the inside of the timing case cover there. That's typically what more you'll see, a little bit more of that old kind of oil on these surfaces. So I'm just going to take a minute to wipe down the oil around the edge here and down the spark plug tubes. And then I'll come back here and get that oil just so it doesn't drip back and make a mess. Alright, so at this point, if you're just in here to replace a leaking valve cover gasket, we just have to swap in a new gasket and put the cover on, put everything back together, which I'll show next. But I do want to mention, again at this point, while you have the valve cover off, it's a good idea to check the timing chain tensioner and verify that it is not leaking, because they do leak very often, and that leak is often mistaken for a valve cover gasket leak. Here's what the timing chain tensioner looks like and where it is, so have a look back here and make sure that it's not leaking. If it is leaking and you'd like to remove that tensioner and replace the O-ring, jump down to the time-stamped link in the pinned comment to see that procedure, because you'll want to complete that repair while you have the valve cover removed. It is a very simple repair, and by now you've done about 90% of the work by having the valve cover removed, but there is a special technique required for reinstalling the chain tensioner, and that's all covered in that other video, so check that out if you need that info. So double check for a leak at the timing chain tensioner while you have the valve cover off, because next we'll move to replacing the valve cover gasket. You'll hear me say that I'm reusing my old gasket, and that's just because I was under the valve cover to do the tensioner and my gasket was fairly new, so I was able to reuse it. But next I'll show you how to install the new gasket just the same. and we'll get everything put back together. Now, I'm going to try to get away with reusing this valve cover gasket. I'll put up the part numbers if you want to replace yours, and if you have never replaced it, just go ahead and replace it, because it's almost guaranteed to leak if it's the original and you reuse it. Whether your gasket came up with the cover like this one did, or if it got stuck to the head, it'll just kind of peel off. It'll peel off, either peel off the head, or I'll show you how it will peel out of here. All right, so you just take the whole thing out. And again, if you're going to reuse it like I am, just be careful with it. You can leave it in place if it comes out on the cover like this and you're reusing it. But I'm going to show you what it looks like and how to clean it. So you're just going to go all the way around the perimeter and get this channel cleaned up. And then here, 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 and here. I got the Ishino Stone head gasket kit, and this valve cover gasket, I believe, came with that kit. And this is not a Toyota kit, but it looks like it is a Toyota OE maker because it's got a Toyota part number on there. And that's 11213 22050. So when you put it on, this end goes on this side. So this ring goes on that one there. So we'll just kind of lay it out. And let me make sure the camera's going to focus. Okay. So I'll just loosely get it in place, and then we'll go around and push it into the channel. You can see it's got a lot of little features, and this valve cover gasket fits really well. The Fel-Pro ones, which are often like a bright blue, those ones fit well too. So once we have it in, we're going to go around and really push it in. The idea is that when I flip this over and shake it, the valve cover gasket won't move out. But you want to kind of lay it in loosely first, just because like these spots here, you want it in good alignment. So now I'm just going to move all the way around and press it in real well. Press this in. Come around here and just makes a few trips around. Don't use any RTV to hold this gasket to the cover. The reason is that just makes a mess. There's those two places where the timing cover meets the head. It's like about here and here that we'll put RTV, but we're going to put those on the head. We're not going to put those on this side. We'll put it on the head side. So I'm just going to go all the way around, make sure this is in there really well. And now I can take this, flip it over, and shake it. And it's not falling out, it's not flopping out, so that is a good fit. On these two spots here, right here, and in that similar spot right back there, make sure you remove that old gasket maker. We'll put new gasket maker on, but put something behind here so you don't accidentally drop it into the timing chain. So the other thing you can do, like if yours is real messy, you can put the vacuum cleaner on while you're doing this and have the vacuum cleaner suck it up. That way you know it's not going to end up in the timing chain cover, that area here, or in the head area. So I'll just get this cleaned up, and then remember there's the one on the other side too. Make sure you've got your template nearby, and make sure that this gasket surface is nice and clean all the way around. Anywhere where the gasket is going to fit. Just get it nice and cleaned up there, and then don't forget in the middle as well. You need to do those spots in the middle. And now, as you can see here on our FSM printout, there's two spots where we need to put some gasket maker or FIPG, form in place gasket, and that is a part number for the seal packing, the Toyota seal packing. I use Permatex Ultra Black. I think it's as good as any. Other products like Right Stuff and even Permatex Ultra Gray probably would work pretty well for this application. But what we're going to do is just put a little bit of RTV right there at that spot where the timing case cover meets the head. And that's just to reduce the chances of getting any oil leaks there. This is a milled head on this engine here from the rebuild, so you won't have as much of a step right there as I do. Yours should be nice and smooth, so I'm just going to put maybe a little extra compared to what you'll have to do. So this is what I'm going to use, Permatex Ultra Black, and I've just got it cut like that. And I've got a little bit, like I said, on either side because this is a milled head. I've got just a little bit more depth there, so I'll have to put probably a little bit more than you will. This is only to stop an oil leak at this spot. We don't want to put so much that we would cause bits of it to fall back in the timing chain. Oops, stopped recording. It wasn't leaking before the way I did it before, so I'm just going to put on that same amount, which is not much. Alright, now we'll put the valve cover back on. Have your fasteners and your ratchets nearby. We're just going to line it up right here with these studs and have it drop right into place. Make sure that's out of my way back there. It is. There we go. Now we're just going to put all of these guys in hand tight. I'm just going to start with these guys in the middle. Sorry about that on the camera. This one with the bracket and the nut. That's the one where that's going to turn on there. While we're doing brackets, this one over here, that shape is going to fit under there and down like so. We can we'll have to turn that bracket just a little bit. That's our stud, that one there. And this one goes in kind of like that. Alright, now we'll just make a bunch of passes, just kind of slowly tightening them. Zigzagging, crisscrossing, etc. The idea is just to tighten them fairly evenly so that you don't end up with any leaks. This is our oddball 12mm here. This will be the last pass by hand because they're starting to tighten up enough that I'm going to need the wrench here soon. And our oddball. I've got the torque wrench here at 80 inch-pounds because these two fasteners, their final torque is 80 inch-pounds. So we're just going to make a bunch of passes. The other fasteners are a little bit tighter, which is still not very tight. They're just 96 inch-pounds. Okay. Alright, looks like we're getting everybody at 80 inch-pounds. Be sure to turn that bracket like that so that it'll fit back in this thing before you torque this one down all the way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the oddball, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right. Now we can slip this harness back in place. If you had this zip tied up like I did, this, if you remember, went around like that, and hopefully you can see that. You can see that just barely, hopefully. Ratchet that on like that. this, you remember, just turns. There we go. And this one up here is the easier one. Just turns and goes on. Easier. There we go. I know that's not the greatest view, but you remember this blue one here? This just pulls back and the blue one slips onto that brace bracket. Now we'll get the igniters back in, make sure that this grommet is on there. I numbered mine, but it's not necessary. They are interchangeable. Those fasteners are the little 10mm. Those are those fasteners there. Torque on these fasteners is just 80 inch-pounds. Just don't overdo it. Now these two fasteners here for this steel, which we can get in line now. There we go. Torque on these is also 80 inch-pounds, just don't overdo it. And now we can get our igniters plugged in. We're just going to line it up, push it until it snaps. Snap. And if you didn't happen to label yours, like I say, they really only fit. You can't make them, they just won't fit wrong. But it's never a bad idea to label stuff. Snap and snap. Now the hoses, the larger diameter one goes here. You can see that this hose is pretty brittle. It's getting a little split at the end here, so I'm going to have to replace this hose. See that right there? I'm going to have to replace this hose pretty soon. And it's kind of a specialized hose because it looks like it's got a little bit of a different size on either end, so I'll probably end up having to buy this one from Toyota. If yours are difficult to get on, you can put a little engine oil on there to help you with that. And then squeeze this. Alright. And then the smaller one goes back here to the PCV valve. And, ooh, you know what? I'm going to have to run this under. Connect this one first and you won't have to run it under like I just did. And there's that one. And same deal. We'll just squeeze it with the fingers and get it on there. Alright. And the very last step is the easiest one, and that's just to wait for the RTV to cure for those two spots. So just check out the instructions of whatever type of RTV you used. The Permatex Ultra Black sets in a shorter period of time than overnight, but I usually just let it set overnight. Once it's set, you should be able to touch it and it should feel pretty hard. And then you're all set. So that is a wrap on our 1ZZ-FE valve cover gasket replacement. I hope this video was helpful for you. Thank you for watching and good luck with your repair.